I was sitting in my garden just yesterday morning watching a tiny caterpillar struggling to break free from its chrysalis. My first instinct, and I bet this would be many of yours too, is to help it, to reach out and gently tear that cocoon, making its transformation easier. But I stopped myself remembering a profound truth that nature teaches us. That struggle is necessary. That butterfly needed the resistance of breaking free to strengthen its wings for flight. And isn't that just like the negative thoughts we wrestle with every day? Those persistent voices telling us we're not good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. We want someone to come along and make them disappear, to break us free from that cocoon of negativity. But just like that butterfly, our strength comes from the struggle itself. Pausing to make eye contact with the audience, I want you to think about something for a moment. When was the last time you heard that inner voice of doubt? Maybe it was this morning, looking in the mirror. Maybe it was at work before making an important presentation. Maybe it was just a few minutes ago, walking into this room, wondering if you really belong here. That voice is familiar to all of us. I spent years of my life listening to it. Even after writing my first book, even after speaking to thousands of people, that voice would whisper, "Wayne, who do you think you are? What makes you qualified to guide others?" And you know what? For the longest time, I believed it. But here's what I discovered, and what I'm here to share with you today. Those negative thoughts aren't your reality. They're just habits. Habits that were formed long ago, maybe in childhood, maybe through difficult experiences, maybe through the well-meaning but limiting beliefs of others. And just like any habit, they can be changed. Let me tell you about Sarah, a woman I met at one of my workshops in 1994. Sarah had spent 30 years believing she wasn't creative. Why? Because in third grade, a teacher had looked at her drawing and said, maybe you should stick to math. One casual comment, probably forgotten by the teacher moments later, had shaped 3 decades of Sarah's life. When she shared this with me, I asked her something I'm going to ask you right now. Who gave that thought permission to live in your head rent-free? Who signed the lease? Because here's the truth. You are the landlord of your mind, and you have the power to evict any thought that doesn't serve your highest purpose. The challenge isn't in knowing this truth. Deep down, we all know it. The challenge is in living it, in consciously choosing, moment by moment, which thoughts we'll believe and which ones we'll challenge. It's about developing what I call thought awarenesses, becoming the observer of your own mind. Think of your mind as a vast sky and your thoughts as clouds passing through it. Some clouds are light and bright, bringing thoughts of joy, possibility, and peace. Others are dark and heavy, carrying doubts, fears, and limitations. But everything yours. And this is crucial. You are not those clouds. You are the sky, vast, boundless, and unchanging, regardless of what passes through it. I remember working with a successful businessman in Detroit back in 2008. On paper, he had everything: wealth, status, family, but he was miserable. When we dug deeper, we discovered why. Every achievement in his life was immediately followed by the thought, yeah, but what if I lose it all? Every celebration was shadowed by the fear of failure. Every joy was tainted by the expectation of loss. He was living what I call the but life. And I bet some of you are living it too. Yeah, I got the promotion, but they'll probably realize they made a mistake. Yeah, I'm in a great relationship, but it probably won't last. Yeah, I'm healthy now, but who knows what could happen? These thoughts seem protective. They feel like they're keeping us safe, preparing us for the worst. But let me ask you something. Has worrying about something ever prevented it from happening? Has anxiety ever solved a problem? Has fear ever created success? The truth is, negative thoughts are like a rocking chair. They give you something to do, but they don't take you anywhere. And just like you can choose to get out of a rocking chair and walk somewhere, you can choose to challenge these thoughts and create new ones. But say, and this is important, I'm not talking about positive thinking as a Band-Aid. I'm not suggesting you paste a smile on your face and pretend everything's fine. What I'm talking about is something much more powerful: authentic thought, transformation. It begins with awareness. Right now in this moment, I want you to close your eyes. Just for a moment, close your eyes and listen to the thoughts passing through your mind. Don't judge them. Don't try to change them. Just observe them. You like watching cars pass by on the street. What did you notice? Was there criticism, doubt, worry, fear? Or maybe there was hope, curiosity, excitement about what you might learn today? Whatever you noticed, here's what I want you to understand. Those thoughts, whether positive or negative, are not facts. They're interpretations. They're stories you've learned to tell yourself, and just like you can learn a new language, you can learn a new way of thinking. Let me share something personal with you. In the early days of my career, I was terrified of public speaking. Ironic, isn't it? The thought of standing in front of an audience would fill me with dread. My inner dialogue was relentless. You'll forget what to say. They'll see you're a fraud. You'll make a fool of yourself. But instead of letting these thoughts control me, I learned to question them. When the thought you'll forget what to say came up, I'd ask myself, is that true? Has that actually happened? And even if it did, would it be the end of the world? This is what I call the truth test. Every negative thought that pops into your head, put it through this test. Is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? How do you react when you believe this thought? Who would you be without this thought? Every thought you have is a choice, every single one. When you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, you choose what to think about what you see. When you face a challenge at work, you choose what to think about your capabilities. When you encounter a setback, you choose what to think about its meaning. And here's the incredible thing. These choices create your reality, not in some mystical, magical way, but in a very practical, observable way. Your thoughts influence your emotions, which influence your actions, which create your results. But I know what some of you are thinking right now. Wayne, you don't understand. My negative thoughts aren't choices. They're reactions to real problems in my life. And I hear you. I truly do. Let me share something profound with you. Every problem we face exists at two levels. The actual situation and our thoughts about the situation. And here's what's fascinating. Most of our suffering comes not from the situations themselves, but from our thoughts about them. I remember counseling a young woman in 2012 who had lost her job. She came to me in deep despair, but as we talked, something remarkable became clear. Her suffering wasn't coming from being unemployed. It was coming from the story she was telling herself about being unemployed. So I'm a failure. I'll never find another job. My life is over. Those thoughts, not the job loss itself, were paralyzing her. They were preventing her from updating her resume, from networking, from seeing new opportunities. The circumstance was temporary, but her thoughts were making it permanent. You see, negative thoughts have this sneaky way of presenting themselves as truth tellers, as protectors. They masquerade as wisdom, as realism. I'm just being practical. We tell ourselves, I'm just being realistic. But let me ask you this, is it realistic to assume the worst? Is it practical to limit your potential? Is it wise to let fear make your decisions? Think about this. Every major breakthrough in human history came from someone who refused to accept the realistic limitations of their time. The Wright brothers didn't accept that humans couldn't fly. Edison didn't accept that darkness was inevitable after sunset. Dr. King didn't accept that segregation was unchangeable. These weren't people living in denial of reality. They were people who understood a fundamental truth. Reality is malleable, and it begins with our thoughts. Now, I can see some of you shifting uncomfortably in your seats. You're thinking, that's all well and good for world changers and innovators, but what about my everyday struggles? What about my anxiety about paying bills? What about my fears about my children's future? What about my doubts about my abilities? These are valid questions. And they bring us to a crucial point. Challenging negative thoughts doesn't mean denying real challenges. It means approaching those challenges from a position of power rather than fear. Let me introduce you to what I call the power question technique. When a negative thought arises, instead of accepting it or fighting it, ask yourself, what would be possible if this thought weren't true? For example, if you're thinking, I'm too old to start a new career, ask yourself, what would be possible if age wasn't a limitation? If you're thinking, I'm not smart enough for this promotion, ask yourself, what would be possible if I already had all the intelligence I needed? I want you to try this right now. Think of a negative thought that's been weighing on you lately. Got it? Now ask yourself, what would be possible if this thought weren't true? Take a moment, really imagine it. Feel the difference? That sensation of expansion, of possibility. That's your natural state, the state of limitation, of fear, of doubt. That's learned, and what's learned can be unlearned. I worked with a painter in 2014 who had convinced himself he couldn't sell his art because no one wants to buy paintings in a bad economy. When we applied the power question, what would be possible if that thought weren't true? He realized something profound. The economy wasn't stopping people from buying art. His belief about the economy was stopping him from trying to sell it. Within 6 months of challenging that thought, he had his first successful gallery showing. The economy hadn't changed. His thoughts had. This brings us to another crucial aspect of challenging negative thoughts, understanding their source. Most of our limiting thoughts aren't originally ours. They're inherited from parents, teachers, society, media. They're hand-me-down beliefs that we've accepted without question. I remember talking to a group of college students in 2013. I asked them why they chose their majors. And so many of them said things like, well, my parents said this field has good job securities, or everyone says this is where the money is. When I asked them what they would study if they could choose anything, their eyes lit up with completely different answers. They're negative thoughts about following their true interests. That's not practical. You can't make a living doing that. That's just a hobby worth their own thoughts. They were echoes of other people's fears. This is why awareness is so crucial. When a negative thought appears, ask yourself, is this really my thought? Is this really my truth? Or am I carrying someone else's limitations? Let me share a powerful exercise with you. I call it the e-thought origin trace. When a negative thought appears, trace it back to its source. Where did you first hear it? When did you first believe it? Whose voice is it, really? Often you'll find that your most limiting thoughts are simply outdated protection mechanisms. They're like keeping your childhood nightlight on long into adulthood. They served a purpose once, but now they're just holding you back. In 2010, I worked with a talented musician who had given up on his dreams of performing. Why? Because in 7th grade, his music teacher had told him he didn't have a natural rhythm. For 20 years and 20 years, he had carried that thought as if it were gospel truth. When we traced that thought back to its origin, he realized something amazing. That teacher had made that comment during one class on one day, possibly while having a bad day herself. Yet he had allowed that single moment to define 2 decades of his life. How many of us are doing the same thing? How many of our negative thoughts are simply ancient judgments that we've never thought to question? How many of our limitations are just echoes of old wounds that have long since healed? The beautiful truth is, you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes your thoughts. And from that awareness comes choice. The choice to challenge, to question, to change. But, and this is crucial, challenging negative thoughts isn't about warfare. It's not about fighting or suppressing or denying. It's about gentle, persistent questioning. It's about being curious rather than judgmental. When a negative thought appears, treat it like a confused child rather than an enemy. Ask it. Where did you come from? What are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to protect me from? This approach, this gentle questioning, does something remarkable. It transforms your relationship with your thoughts. Instead of being a victim of your thinking, you become an investigator, a researcher of your own consciousness. The real transformation begins when you realize that challenging negative thoughts isn't just about personal comfort. It's about living your authentic purpose. Every negative thought that goes unchallenged is a barrier between you and your highest potential. I want to share something remarkable that happened during a workshop in Maui back in 2013. A woman in her 50s stood up and shared her story. She had spent her entire life believing she wasn't leadership material. Why? Because she was soft-spoken. Because she led with empathy rather than authority. Because she didn't fit the traditional mold of what a leader should be. Those very qualities she saw as weaknesses were actually her greatest strengths. Her soft-spoken nature made people lean in and listen more carefully. Her empathy created deep connections with her team. Her different approach to leadership was exactly what her organization needed. The negative thoughts that had held her back weren't protecting her. They were protecting an outdated definition of leadership. When she challenged those thoughts, she didn't just change her mind. She changed her entire career trajectory. This brings us to what I call the A-thought replacement process. Now, I'm not talking about positive affirmations or pretending negative thoughts don't exist. I'm talking about something much more powerful, conscious thought evolution. Here's how it works. When you identify a negative thought, don't just try to push it away. Instead, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what's the evidence for and against this thought? How is this thought serving me? Why isn't that? What would be a more empowering way to view this situation? Let me give you a real example. In 2014, I worked with a writer who constantly thought, my work isn't good enough. When we applied these questions, here's what happened. Yeah, some people had rejected his work, but others had deeply connected with it. The thought not good enough was a blanket statement ignoring all positive feedback. How was the thought serving him? It was keeping him careful and conscientious about his work, but it was also paralyzing him with perfectionism. A more empowering view? My work is constantly evolving, and every piece I write helps me grow as an artist. See the difference? We didn't deny the challenges. We didn't paste on artificial positivity. We evolved the thought into something that acknowledged both reality and possibility. This is what real inner transformation looks like. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more authentically yourself by challenging the thoughts that have been holding your authentic self captive. I often think about how many dreams remain unlived, how many gifts remain ungiven, how many lives remain unchanged because of unchallenged negative thoughts. It's like having a priceless treasure locked in a vault, and the only key is our willingness to question our limiting beliefs. Every great achievement in your life began with challenging a negative thought. Every time you've grown, every time you've succeeded, every time you've surprised yourself, it started with challenging the voice that said you couldn't. I remember working with a group of teachers in 2011. One of them shared how she'd always wanted to start an innovative reading program for struggling students, but for years she'd held back. The negative thoughts were relentless. The administration won't support it. Parents won't understand it. It's too different from traditional methods. Then one day, she decided to challenge these thoughts, not fight them, not ignore them, but really examine them. She realized something profound. None of these thoughts were facts. Predictions based on fear, not evidence. When she finally proposed her program, something amazing happened. Not only did she get support, but her program went on to help hundreds of students discover the joy of reading, all because she challenged thoughts that had masqueraded as truth for years. This brings us to another powerful tool, the future self-dialogue. Instead of letting negative thoughts pull you backward into past hurts and limitations, engage in a dialogue with your future self, the self that has already overcome these limiting thoughts. How did you move past this limitation? What did you discover that I haven't yet seen? What would you tell me about the negative thoughts I'm believing right now? You see, your future self exists in a place beyond your current negative thoughts. And by engaging in this dialogue, you begin to access the wisdom that's already within you. I once worked with an entrepreneur in 2015 who was paralyzed by the thought, I'm not qualified enough to start this business. Through the future self dialogue, he realized something profound. His future self wasn't more qualified. He was simply more willing to learn as he went along. The negative thought, I'm not qualified enough, transformed into, I'm exactly where I need to be to start this journey. Notice the difference. One thought paralyzes, the other mobilizes. This is what I call thought alchemy, the art of transforming limiting thoughts into empowering ones, not through force or denial, but through wisdom and understanding. Think of it this way. Every negative thought is like a closed door in your mind. Behind that door lies possibility, opportunity, growth. The key to opening that door isn't to break it down. It's to understand why it's closed in the first place. When you approach your negative thoughts with curiosity instead of judgment, with understanding instead of resistance, something miraculous happens. The thoughts begin to transform on their own. not because you forced them to change, but because you gave them space to evolve. I witnessed this transformation in a remarkable way with a painter who came to one of my workshops in 2009. She had been telling herself, real artists don't need to promote their work. This thought had kept her work hidden in her soul. As we explored this thought together, she realized it was rooted in a romantic notion of the struggling artist, not in reality. When she challenged this thought, it naturally evolved this. Real artists want their work to connect with others. This new thought led her to take actions that eventually resulted in her first gallery showing. Every negative thought you challenge becomes a doorway to new possibility. Every limiting belief you question becomes an opportunity for growth. This isn't just positive thinking, it's conscious evolution. What I'm about to share with you now goes beyond just challenging negative thoughts. It's about understanding the deeper purpose of this inner work. Because when you really grasp this, in 2007, I met a successful corporate executive who had everything society said should make him happy. Yet he was profoundly unfulfilled. His mind was filled with thoughts like, this is as good as it gets and being dissatisfied is just part of adult life. These weren't just negative thoughts. They were prison bars keeping his spirit caged. Those thoughts weren't protecting him from disappointment. They were protecting him from his own greatness. They were keeping him in a comfortable prison of mediocrity rather than risking the uncertainty of genuine fulfillment. What I want you to understand is this: the biggest negative thoughts often disguise themselves as wisdom. They say things like, be realistic and don't get your hopes up, and this is just how life is. But here's the truth. These thoughts aren't wisdom. They're fear wearing a mask of wisdom. Let me introduce you to what I call the sacred no practice. This is about learning to say no to thoughts that dim your light, that shrink your spirit, that keep you playing small. It's about recognizing that you have not just the right, but the responsibility to challenge thoughts that don't align with your highest purpose. I worked with an artist in 2013 who always thought, my art isn't important compared to real-world problems. This thought seemed noble, seemed wise, but when we dug deeper, we discovered it was actually a form of self-abandonment. By denying her art's importance, she was denying her own purpose, her own way of contributing to the world's healing. You see, every negative thought you accept becomes a vow you make with limitation. Every self-doubting belief you embrace becomes a contract with mediocrity. But here's the liberating truth. You can break these contracts. You can revoke these vows. This brings us to the concept of thought partnership. Instead of seeing your thoughts as enemies to be defeated or burdens to be carried, what if you saw them as potential partners in your growth, even the negative ones? When a negative thought arises, instead of trying to eliminate it, ask it to show you what it knows. If the thought is, I'm not ready, ask it, what would help me feel more prepared? If the thought is, I'll probably fail, ask it, what concerns are you trying to bring to my attention? I remember working with a scientist in 2015 who was plagued by the thought, my research isn't groundbreaking enough. Instead of fighting this thought, we partnered with it, we asked it what it knew, and what emerged was remarkable. This thought was actually pointing him toward areas of his research he hadn't fully explored. The very doubt that was torturing him became a guide toward deeper innovation. This is what I mean by partnership. Every negative thought contains within it a seed of wisdom. Our job isn't to destroy the thought, but to extract the wisdom while releasing the limitation. In nature, nothing is wasted. Every fallen leaf becomes nourishment for new growth. Your negative thoughts can serve the same purpose. They can become compost for your spiritual and personal growth, but only if you know how to transform them. Let me share with you the thought transformation triangle. This is a 3-step process that turns negative thoughts into spiritual compost. Acknowledge the thought without judgment. Just as you wouldn't judge a fallen leaf for falling, don't judge your thought for arising. Extract the wisdom. Every negative thought is trying to tell you something important, even if it's telling you in a destructive way. To release the limitation while keeping the lesson. Just as a gardener keeps the nutrients from compost while discarding the waste, you keep the wisdom while releasing the limitation. I witnessed this process work beautifully with a teacher in 2012 who constantly thought, I'm not doing enough for my students. When we applied the transformation triangle, here's what emerged. The wisdom in her thought was her deep commitment to her students' growth. The limitation was the belief that enough was a fixed destination rather than an ongoing journey. By keeping the wisdom of caring deeply while releasing the limitation of perfectionism, she became an even more effective teacher. This brings us to something I call thought ecology. Just as every ecosystem needs both sun and rain, your mind needs both challenging and nurturing thoughts. The goal isn't to create a mind free of negative thoughts. That's neither possible nor desirable. The goal is to create a mind where negative thoughts can be transformed into wisdom. Think about that. So every great innovation, every meaningful change, every personal breakthrough began with challenging a negative thought, but it didn't end there. It ended with transforming that thought into something useful, something meaningful, something that served growth rather than... In 2010, I worked with a businessman who transformed his company's entire culture by applying these principles. His persistent thought was, business is just about making money. When we worked with this thought instead of against it, something remarkable emerged. The thought evolved us. The business is about creating value, and money is one measure of that value. This subtle shift changed everything. It led to innovations in how his company served customers, treated employees, and contributed to the community. All because he learned to transform a limiting thought rather than just fight it. You see, negative thoughts aren't your enemy. Believing them blindly, that's the real enemy. When you learn to challenge negative thoughts with wisdom rather than warfare, with curiosity rather than condemnation, with partnership, your negative thoughts are like uncut diamonds. In their raw state, they can be heavy burdens that weigh you down. But when you learn to cut them properly, to shape them with wisdom and understanding, they become precious gems that light your way forward. As we move toward our closing moments together, I want to share something profound with you. Everything we've discussed today, every technique, every insight, every transformation comes down to one fundamental truth. You are not the programmer of your negative thoughts, but you are the conscious observer who can reprogram them. Let me share a story that brings us all together. In 2014, I worked with a woman who had spent decades believing she was too broken to be loved. This thought had shaped every relationship, every decision, every moment of her life. But when she finally challenged this thought, she discovered something extraordinary. She wasn't broken at all. She was simply believing a story that someone else had written for her. What thoughts are you passing on? Because here's the truth. Your thought patterns don't just affect you. They ripple out into the world, touching everyone around you. They become part of your legacy. I remember working with a father in 2008 who was constantly thinking, life is a struggle. He didn't realize that his children were inheriting this thought pattern until his 10-year-old daughter said something that stopped him in his tracks. Daddy, is it okay to enjoy things? Or should I pretend everything's hard? That moment changed everything for him. He realized that challenging his negative thoughts wasn't just about his own peace. It was about the thought patterns he was passing on to the next generation. This is why the work we're doing here today is so crucial. When you challenge a negative thought, you're not just changing your own mind. You're helping to change the collective consciousness. You're contributing to the evolution of human thought. Let me introduce you to the concept of thought stewardship. Just as we're learning to be better stewards of the earth, we must learn to be better stewards of our thoughts. Every negative thought you challenge and transform creates ripples of possibility for us. In 2013, I worked with a small business owner who transformed her thought, I'm not qualified to mentor others, into my experiences, both successes and failures, are valuable lessons I can share. This transformation didn't just change her life. It changed the lives of dozens of young entrepreneurs she went on to mentor. You see, challenging negative thoughts isn't just a personal practice, it's a form of service. Every time you choose to challenge a limiting belief, you make it easier for others to do the same. You become a way shower, a light in the darkness. This brings us to the thought liberation protocol. 3 commitments I want you to make to yourself today. First, I commit to question your negative thoughts, not because they're wrong, but because they deserve to be examined. Commit to transforming these thoughts, not by force, but through understanding and wisdom. Third, commit to sharing your transformations, not by preaching, but by living them openly and authentically. I witnessed the power of these commitments through a teacher I worked with in 2015. She transformed her thought, I'm too old to make a difference, into my age is my advantage. This transformation didn't just change her teaching. It changed how her students viewed their own potential. Every negative thought you challenge creates a crack in the collective wall of limitation. Every limiting belief you transform helps others see what's possible in their own lives. Let me share a powerful practice I call thought archaeology. Like an archaeologist carefully uncovering ancient artifacts, you can learn to uncover the origins of your negative thoughts with patience and curiosity. Each layer you remove reveals more truth, more understanding, more possibility. I worked with an artist in 2006 who discovered through this practice that her thought my work isn't professional enough actually came from a childhood memory of being told her coloring was too messy. When she uncovered this, the thought lost its power. She realized she had been letting a kindergarten criticism define her adult creativity. This is the deeper work of challenging negative thoughts. It's not just about changing what you think, it's about understanding why you think it. Because when you understand the why, the what often transforms on its own. Every negative thought you hold is like a piece of dark glass you're looking through. It doesn't just color how you see yourself, it colors how you see everything and everyone. When you challenge these thoughts, you're not just changing your mind, you're changing your entire experience of life. I want to share one final tool with you. A thought blessing practice. Instead of seeing your negative thoughts as curses to be removed, see them as misguided blessings waiting to be redirected. Every negative thought is trying to protect you, guide you, or teach you something. Your job is to receive the blessing while releasing the limitation. In 2011, I worked with a writer who blessed her thought, I'm not good enough, by saying, thank you for trying to protect me from rejection. But I choose to risk rejection in service of sharing my gift. This simple shift changed everything. The thought didn't disappear. It transformed into fuel for growth. As we come to a close, I want you to understand something vital. The work of challenging negative thoughts never ends, but it does get easier, like building a muscle. Each challenge makes you stronger. Each transformation makes the next one more natural. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness watching your thoughts. You are the consciousness that can choose which thoughts to believe and which to challenge. You are the alchemist who can transform lead thoughts into gold wisdom. Every morning when you wake up, you have a choice. You can let your negative thoughts write your story, or you can challenge them and write your own. You can let your limiting beliefs define your boundaries, or you can transform them into stepping stones toward your highest potential. The power has always been yours. It always will be. The only question is what will you do with it? What thoughts will you challenge today? What limitations will you transform? What possibilities will you open up, not just for yourself, but for everyone your life touches? Because in the end, challenging negative thoughts isn't just about personal freedom. It's about collective liberation. It's about contributing to a world where people dare to think bigger, love deeper, and live more authentically.
Your thoughts are your gift to the world. Make them worthy of your spirit. Make them worthy of your potential. Make them worthy of the light you came here to share.
Thank you for allowing me to share these truths with you today. The real work begins now in your minds, in your hearts, in your daily choices. Choose wisely, choose lovingly, and above all, choose consciously. The thought you challenge today could be the limitation someone else breaks free from tomorrow. Your inner work is world work. Your personal transformation is part of our collective evolution. Go forth and challenge those thoughts. Transform them. Share them. And watch as your life and the lives of those around you transform in ways you never imagined possible.